Imagination connoisseurs, welcome to the actual 165th live Robservation stream. Robservations is, of course, the show about something. Many people have messaged me right now about John Campea going on at the same time to do his Spider-Man Far From Home spoiler review. But Gilbert and Tallulah, as you can see, they don't want me to not stream. But I'm wondering, should I stream later? Perhaps I could. I could stream later, but or not. It's very hot here. I think I'm just going to go ahead because why not? Why not just do a stream? I'm on, and I'm going to do it anyway. So welcome all of you imagination connoisseurs to the Post-Geek Singularity community. And this is the 165th episode of Robservations, the show about something. I had misnumbered my shows, and it was pointed out to me by Hassan Chavez that I had done just that. So thank you for pointing that out. I love it when people point out mistakes. It's important when you make mistakes to have them pointed out, which is the topic of today's chat. I'm going to surprise you, and I'm gonna let you hang on that one for a while. Well, not very long, but for why I decided to bring this up as a topic and why I used an admittedly trolling photo, like a photo from Solo, to get people to come to this chat. But anyway, first of all, as everyone knows, California has been hit with a number of earthquakes. We were lucky. We're about 150 miles from the epicenter here. And if you know anything about the Richter scale and how earthquakes work, we'd had a 6.4 on 4th of July. And then yesterday it was 7.1. People thought it was downgraded to a 6.9, but it was not. And the way the Richter scale works, it's on an exponentially sliding scale upward. So the 7.1 earthquake was extremely... It was a lot bigger. It was a lot bigger. I'll say that. I've been through a lot of earthquakes in the last 31 years, and they really don't faze me. The Northridge quake in 94 was easily the biggest earthquake I ever felt. But that earthquake was as if the building that I was in was literally picked up and dropped on the ground. And I was house sitting, and for my friend Peter Billingsley, who was actually briefly in Spider-Man Far From Home, I believe. And everything in his kitchen, every single dish, every cupboard just emptied out and shattered on the ground. It was an amazing mess of stuff. So that wasn't good. But this earthquake, as I've said, these were rolling earthquakes. It really felt like you were on a waterbed. So it was pretty extreme, to be honest. I mean, I've never felt, I don't think, a longer earthquake in the time that I've been here. It was really long. It started slow and built up, and then you really could feel it shaking, rattling, and rolling. Now, I am not scared of earthquakes. The house I live in is a single-story house, so even if something fell down, it wouldn't be that bad. Although we are around power poles, and they can fall over. But for the most part, my dogs didn't even bark. That's how sort of languidly paced this earthquake was. It was just kind of it was kind of fun. You know, I enjoy earthquakes, to be honest. They're a fact of life. They don't scare me. Volcanoes don't scare me really either. I lived in Washington State, and when Mount St. Helens exploded in 1980, it really did, even though I was very far away, it looked like the end of the world. The Mount St. Helens quake erupting was quite unlike, say, where you see lava. A gigantic section of the mountain just exploded outward, and there was just a column of debris that went up into the sky for miles. I mean, you could see it from hundreds of miles away, and it really did look like the world was ending. And then it started to just rain ash everywhere. It was kind of interesting. So I've seen volcanic eruptions, I've seen earthquakes, and I've been through big earthquakes. And it's interesting, but it's also a humble reminder. I read an article on CNN today that said the Trump administration was no longer going to fund honeybee research to study the effects of colony collapse disorder, which again, we do not study science at our own peril. I don't understand why anybody would cut funding to science research in any way, shape, or form. It doesn't make much sense. But if people are really interested, since these earthquakes have begun, we've basically been having earthquakes every 30 seconds. In California, believe it or not, that seems extreme, but we've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of earthquakes. I mean, they're minor. They don't really register. We can't feel them here until they get up above, say, 6.5. I felt a few of the aftershocks, but it's pretty interesting. None of my hot toys fell over. I haven't been into the garage yet. My imagination my sanctarium, my imagination, but my imaginarium. I don't know if anything has fallen from there, but there's a lot of things that could have fallen. I haven't gone to look. But so yes, it's been crazy here in California. But anyway, before I get into it, I want to remind everyone that these chats are brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com and you buy stuff and you punch in PGS as your code for Post-Geek Singularity, you get 20% off your order, which is fantastic. I also dropped the second episode of Living the Lucky Tiger Life that's on my channel, Robservations Presents. And I interviewed James Hills, and he was actually on a cruise ship in Vancouver, British Columbia, when I interviewed him via Skype. Next time he's up there, I'm going to have him interview Willow Yang. And that brings me to the basis of this chat, which surprisingly, would it surprise anyone to know that today's chat, today's subject matter, and how I'm going to start this off is with a letter from Miss Willow Yang, Willow, as it were. Yes, indeed. She wrote me. It's a change of pace for Willow, but it really got me thinking, and I really like this letter a lot. But it's very different from Willow's other letters. However, I still think it does apply to most things, especially filmmaking. But in her case, it doesn't. But I'm going to read this letter from Willow. So take it away, Willow. Dear Rob, I must apologize in advance for being a complete downer recently. First with my politically charged letter earlier this week, and now with this tale of woe that I'm about to tell you. I was actually initially going to write a review of John Wayne's The Conqueror, but something came up. I found myself desperately needing someone to talk to share my fears and sorrows with, and I ended up turning to you and the Post-Geek Singularity community. Well, here goes my story. As you may remember, I've recently submitted a manuscript, a scientific research paper, to Nature Chemical Biology, which is quite a prestigious journal. The paper was the culmination of 3.5 years of intensive labor during my current PhD. As of a few weeks ago, it had actually passed through peer review and appeared to be on the cusp of being published. I was just required to make some additional revisions in order to satisfy the journal's formatting guidelines. I've already been showered with a deluge of congratulations from my collaborators and colleagues. My PI actually brought in a cake in celebration of my accomplishment. However, being the neurotic person that I am, I could not help but worry that perhaps celebrations were still premature, that something terrible was lurking just around the corner. My worst fears were realized yesterday evening. I was checking up on the status of my recently submitted revised manuscript, where I suddenly noticed something amiss with one of the tables. Some of the values that were being displayed seemed off. After doing a quick check with my data, I realized that the units in the table were wrong. I had planned on watching Turnabout Intruder, but needless to say, I was not in the mood for Star Trek or anything else. I was overcome with the paralyzing terror of the all too real possibility that my manuscript may now get rejected by the editors, to whom I must now disclose the mistake. The notion is devastating. As the first author of the paper, I know that any faults in it lies with me, that I am solely responsible for this egregious error. I feel that I had let everyone down, my PA, my collaborators, and myself. This is literally my worst nightmare come to life. I know that I must persevere. I cannot crumble in the face of hardship. I must own up to my mistakes. Right now, I just want to curl up into a ball and wallow in my miseries. Hopefully soon, though, I'd have gathered myself back together to face the world again. I just can really do with a good pep talk right now, or an inspiring story, or a recommendation for a movie to cheer me up. Thank you for indulging me in my lamentations. Well, since you used the word lamentations, I would suggest watching Conan the Barbarian, because that has the best use of lamentations in any movie ever made. But I'll leave that for you to discover on your own. By the way, Conan the Barbarian, not Conan the Destroyer, but Conan the Barbarian from 1982, directed by John Milius, is great fun. I promise that I will send in something chipper as soon as I've figured out a way to deal with this mess. Yours sincerely, Willow. First of all, Willow, don't feel bad. And the reason you shouldn't feel bad is because you wrote me this letter, but this letter concerns me greatly. because you said that you went in to check on your work, to check on the status of your paper, and then you noticed that the tables with data in them are wrong. Well, if it were me, as soon as I discovered that, I would double check to make sure I was indeed correct, that they were wrong. But my next action, as yours should be, if you haven't already done this, is to write the publishers of the paper, explain the mistake, however you need to explain it, and submit the proper information. Here's the table that should appear. There is no shame in this. There is nothing wrong with your television set. You should not adjust the vertical. You should not adjust the horizontal. You should simply fix the problem. Based on this letter, you know the problem exists. You haven't said you've written in or sent in, maybe you have, corrections. No one is going to pillory you because you sent in corrections. They will, in fact, as a good scientist, they will probably appreciate that you've double-checked your work to make sure that they didn't publish something that they would later have to either print a retraction or print a correction. Everybody wants that. And I think that this is a perfect example. This is what I would call a teaching moment for everyone. You're talking about curling up in a ball, letting people down. You haven't let anybody down. You know, you've taken your letter and got it into this. I must apologize. I am not a subscriber to Nature Chemical Biology, nor have I ever purchased an issue of it. But now, because you might be publishing it, I think you still will be publishing it. You make me want to read that journal, at least read your paper. Now, here's the thing. We all make mistakes all the time. When I'm working on a film, when I'm the post supervisor of a movie, I find my mistakes all the time and correct them. One of the great things about working in motion pictures is there's no time to blame anyone. You just have to fix the mistake. And the people that you want to keep working with are those people that realize mistakes, that they're always checking their work to make sure if there's something in the back of your mind that makes you think there might be a mistake, or and when you find a mistake, you immediately fix the problem. There is no shame in ever alleviating or fixing a mistake. As a matter of fact, I would much rather have people that make mistakes, that find out what those mistakes are and immediately come to me and say, hey, bruh, I made a mistake. As long as you can offer the solution, or even if you can't, you admit the mistake and you ask for help. When you're working in motion pictures, there's a lot of people that want to blame others, but I have found that never works. When you're working on a project like this, or you're writing an article, and people are counting on you to provide information, the fact that you found a mistake shows that you're a good scientist, that you're double checking, triple checking, quadruple checking your work. You know how many mistakes were made when we tried to go to the moon? I mean, when the Apollo program began, how many rockets exploded on the launch pad? Some people died. You know, there were mistakes made all around. And I would say that's how we progress. That's how we get better. And I admire you. You wrote me this letter, and I'm like, well, that's exactly what you're supposed to be doing. I want Willow Yang on my scientific team. I don't think I'll ever have a scientific team, but you know what? If the great pandemic breaks out and there's some way that I can survive it, I'm coming to you, because you'll have your PhD and you'll be able to solve my problems, because I can already tell how all curled up in a little ball you are, worried about this mistake. I hope you have corrected the mistake and sent in the correction, and you've explained the problem, that not the article is wrong, but just the table or whatever it is. This is what people do. This is the way of the world. And this is what it happens. It happens this way. You know, you can never go wrong fixing a mistake ever. You know, you stand up and say, you know what, I was wrong. Here's the correction. I've made the correction. I did that. Like, there were times I made mistakes when I was working on Star Trek, The Next Generation. Some of my documentaries might have been even a frame off, and I would discover before we finished that there's a frame off. Or I once misspelled the word miniature in a lower third. How idiotic did I feel? I left out an I in the word miniature. You know, you look at things, you look at them over and over and over and over and over again, and sometimes you just don't like a coffee cup left on in the middle of a shot, multiple shots. There are things that you just don't see. If you want to have something that will uplift you, the director of Shazam If you go to darkhorizons.com, you can find a link to this. The director of Shazam talked about a scene, shows a scene in the movie that they looked at, they'd done all these effects for. They looked at this shot over and over and over again, and no one noticed that the crew was visible in the shot. Not just one, but like 10 crew members, because they weren't looking, believe it or not, you're not looking over in the corner of the frame, you're looking at the effect shot at Shazam running. They didn't see the crew. They had to CGI in bags, and like they turned one person into a janitor. You can watch this video right now. It's a YouTube video. You can find the link to it at darkhorizons.com, which, by the way, if you're genre fans, you should check out darkhorizons.com anyway, because it's a great site. It's an aggregator, but it picks the best stuff on the web. And I know you'll do it. You should fix it and just say you fix it and say, look, please publish this. There was a mistake in the table. This is the corrected table. And you just step up and say, I solved this problem. I really look, and also I look forward to seeing my article in print, but I wanted to make sure everything was correct. So I double checked it all. And I noticed that there was the data in the table was wrong. I have corrected it. Problem solved. And when it comes to movie making, a lot of people talk about how in Solo, for instance, they were deep into production. And, you know, Kathleen Kennedy, at first, you don't want to make sure you want to give people the benefit of the doubt. You do, because you figure if there's really some kind of a problem, there's too much at stake. So you figure it's movie making can be very self-correcting. And it was very interesting to me that people, again, I've always come out in favor of Kathleen Kennedy, but people said, oh, how did she make this mistake? Well, because Lord and Miller were the directors she hired. She was deferring to them as creative people. And I guess it was Lawrence Kasdan who was not happy with all the improvisation that was going on his set. By the way, it's very hot in here today, so I'm sorry. I'm wiping my face. I don't have a napkin or a paper towel or a handkerchief. But it's important that you do this. And I think this is a great life lesson for anybody. If you've made a mistake, I know it's tough, but there's never any downside in correcting that mistake. There never is. There's only an upside. And I think that if you haven't already, you should correct that mistake, because why not? I think it's great. And I think the Post-Geek Singularity will all rally behind you, Willow. As a matter of fact, if you point us to where we can actually buy a copy of Nature Chemical Biology, I'm happy to write to the editors and say, yo, I'm really looking forward to Willow Yang's upcoming article, the paper that you're publishing. That is the result of 3.5 years of intensive labor while you were working on your PhD. I can only imagine what the Post-Geek Singularity could do. Suddenly, like Alan Murphy, the president of Lucky Tiger, when I called for you guys to write him because I wanted to do an interview with him, he was tickled. He was like, who are these people writing to me? So we can do the same thing with the editor of Nature Chemical Biology if there's a problem. But I think they'll welcome you correcting it. And, just take responsibility. No profuse apologies. Just flat out say, hey, look, really looking forward to you publishing my article, but this table is incorrect. Wanted to make sure you had the most up-to-date information. Here it is. Done. And if you need us to, put in a good word, I'll get everybody here to, I'll do a whole show on the episode or the issue of this magazine and talk about the editors. I'll get all their information. We'll dox them, but not their home numbers or anything like that. We'll dox the publisher. So we'll inundate the publisher of Nature Chemical Biology with requests and crazy videos and memes all about, well, perhaps we shouldn't do that. That's probably not the best way of handling it either. Come to think of it. See, that's my mistake. And I'm willing to admit it. Certainly my mistake. Anyway, I really appreciate your letter. I hope this cheers you up a little bit, and I hope you've gotten on it and you will fix the problem. Because remember, everybody makes mistakes all the time. And certainly in the sciences, mistakes are key. How many people have been put on? I mean, half the scientific community made mistakes about where the sun was in relation to the earth for the first how many thousands of years of human existence? Come on now. It's all part of the course. You're going to make a lot of mistakes scientifically in your life. Willow says, she did try contacting the editors. They're currently on break for the week of the 4th of July. Please don't dox the editors. Laugh out loud. Well, see, there you go. So when they come back on the holiday, so Monday morning in their inbox, you will have the corrections for them. See, while they're on vacation celebrating the 4th, you're a Canadian and you are checking your work. You are a diligent scientist. And while we Americans slack off with our barbecues and our beaches and our, let's face it, our earthquakes, you're double checking, triple checking, and quadruple checking your work and finding your error. And you fixed it, or you will fix it by Monday morning. Problem solved. I think the article is still going to be published. You can breathe a sigh of relief, and no one has to know except us, we members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. So good on you, Willow. We're not going to dox the editors, I swear. But either way, I think the lesson is a good lesson that even when you've made mistakes, even if you're like Kathleen Kennedy and you're deep into the production of a movie, if it isn't working, you fix the problem, you work the problem. And especially in the sciences, because mistakes cannot stand. Henry K says that more people should be watching my channel. Well, they will. You know, it's a Saturday. It's during a holiday weekend, Henry. By the way, thanks for supporting the channel, and thanks to Willow for doing the same thing. And also, I didn't realize John Campea was doing a Spider-Man spoiler conversation. So unlike Avengers Endgame, he didn't invite me to be on this one. But that's okay. But yes, so I want to thank Willow Yang for writing in a fantastic letter, because I think there's a lesson to be learned. Whether you're making movies, whatever you're doing in life, it's always better to fix a mistake and take responsibility for it, because we don't live in a world where many people want to accept responsibility for their mistakes. But the thing is, all mistakes will eventually be uncovered anyway. They're all going to be discovered, no matter what. It doesn't matter how long it's going to take. One day your mistake is going to be uncovered, and wouldn't you want to be the one to fix it or take credit for finding the mistake in the first place? I think so. This next letter is just a quick letter. It's from JS, who says, "Hey, Rob, this is part 1 of an extensive YouTube video podcast on the Bond films by real fans." And then he gives me a link, which I'll probably put in the description for this chat. Makes for a good commute listen. Well, that's good. I like that. You can search it as well under Ultimate Bondcast. So there you go. It's on Brad Hansen's YouTube channel. Enjoy it if you have the time or inclination. Sounds good to me. Thank you, JS. I always like being anyone pointing me in the direction of good Bond content. I love hearing analysis. And I guess people had Bond on the brain after my chat yesterday. This one comes from Mark Scarbeck. Hi, Rob. I'm really enjoying the Robservations chat this week on Bond. I could talk Bond forever, from the gorgeous women, beautiful locations, well-tailored suits, cars, and gadgets. What isn't there to love about Bond? I did have an idea for the Burnettwork website as it gets closer to Bond 25. Maybe you could do some weekly trivia or a section where we could post our own reviews of each movie. Of course, if you have the time. I think this is a capital idea, sir. I love this idea. I thought The Living Daylights was one of the strong films of the franchise. I think Dalton was a good mix between the humor of Moore and the ruggedness of Connery. It's a shame that License to Kill didn't have that great of a storyline. Like always, thank you, and Jim, Mike, Terry, Greg, Gilbert, and Tallulah. I hope I spelled that right. You didn't, but that's because we're using like the Gaelic spelling. Tallula. That's how Simon Le Bon's daughter spells her name. And you know what a Duran Duran fan I am. And thanks for all the hard work you do. By the way, I started saving for the Bond 25 Post-Geek Singularity London takeover. Sincerely, Mark Scarbeck. Well, Mark, thank you. It's very exciting. I'm very excited about the potential for the Bond takeover of London. I really enjoy that, which is great. This next one comes from Gil Bovel, like Pavel, but Gil Bovel. Or as we know him, Cardinal Sin here. Hey, Cardinal Sin here, popularizer of the intellectual dork web term, which I love. Doomcock just said on his live stream that he really likes you and would love to have you on the live stream with you. And then he gives me Doomcock on Twitter. It's just at Doomcock on Twitter, of course. Best Gil. Well, Gil, thank you. You know, a lot of people, it's funny, there's a lot of animosity towards Doomcock and towards Gary Beekler at Nerdrotic, and both I've said before, I do enjoy watching both of those guys, and I do think Doomcock, it's a great performance as well. There is a character being put on there, and I think he does a good job. But yeah, I contacted Gary through Twitter, but I didn't hear anything back. And I will contact Doomcock because I think I would love to be on a show to talk with him. I could mellow him out, I think. This next one comes from, well, first of all, hang on. Does it come from? We'll see where it comes from or if it comes from. Let's see. So this next one comes from Dan Skip Allen, who's written a number of times. And this another great letter from Dan. Hey, Rob, now that we've hit the halfway point between let me start again. Now that we've hit the halfway point of 2019, I wanted to share with you some of my favorite films of the year. I've seen a lot of films, including some on streaming services and on demand. So I feel like I have a good idea what the best films of 2019 so far are. My top 10 are as follows. My number one film of 2019 so far is Rocket Man. I loved Taron Egerton as Elton John. Also, Bryce Dallas Howard was really good as his mother. Dexter Fletcher really does a great job seamlessly mixing the topical biopic with a musical. I think Rocket Man is way better than Bohemian Rhapsody. My number 2 is Avengers Endgame. It's a phenomenal film regardless of genre. Spider-Man Far From Home is my number 3. It's equally as great as Avengers Endgame in my opinion. My number 4 is Apollo 11. What an experience at the theater that was. I totally agree. I saw it in IMAX and it was well worth it. My 5 through 9 are Stuber, which I haven't seen, Booksmart, which I have yet to see, Teen Spirit, Long Shot, and Late Night, a group of rom-coms and teen films, all very good in their own right. My number 10 is Hotel Mumbai. I can't wait to see that. An action-packed true story about a terrorist attack in Mumbai, India. You never know what's going to happen from moment to moment. It was very suspenseful. Some honorable mentions are Midsummer, John Wick 3, Toy Story 4, How to Train Your Dragon 3, The Last Black Man in San Francisco, Gloria Bell, Them That Follow, and Fighting with My Family. It's all a great list. I don't necessarily disagree with any of those. I think this year has a really good first half of movies. We had a few great blockbusters and a few great indie films as well. The film festivals have also had some films I'm looking forward to the rest of the summer. The Lion King, Hobbs and Shaw, The Farewell, The Good Boys, Brittany Runs a Marathon, and The Kitchen are some that I cannot wait to see in the rest of the summer. What do you think of this year in film so far, and what are you looking forward to the rest of the summer and 2019 as a whole? Well, I think, obviously I have to say that, yes, I'm going to watch Hobbs and Shaw. I'm looking forward to seeing Midsummer, which I might go see today or tomorrow because I'm looking forward to that. The Farewell, I'm hearing great things about. That's the new Awkwafina film when she goes to say goodbye to her grandmother based on a true story. I really want to see The Last Black Man in San Francisco. Gloria Bell is a remake of the director's original version that was done in Spanish. And I agree, Fighting with My Family. I loved Apollo 11. I think it's great. I just finished Stranger Things today, actually, the 8 episodes of season 3. Thought it was a much stronger, more interesting season than season 2 was. I really enjoyed it. I liked how they structured the season, how they sort of had multiple groups of characters off on their own storylines, and you'll see what happens near the end. I thought it was really well handled. Quite interesting and very heartfelt. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed season 3. I did think the episodes that the Duffer Brothers directed, sometimes they would stop to do funny things that I was like, well, do you really need this now? But, they did. One is deals with a particular song you'll all recognize. I was just like, is this the place for this? But it was kind of fun. But I really overall liked the season a lot. They really, their production design, I love the mall setting. It's not a spoiler to say there was a mall setting. Really quite enjoyed it. But I think you're right. I mean, and of course I do really want to see episode 9. And another film that I really am dying to see is James Gray's Ad Astra, the science fiction film with Tommy Lee Jones and Brad Pitt. If you don't know what Ad Astra is, I highly recommend checking out the trailer, because it looks fantastic and it looks right up my alley. So yeah, that's I think people say, oh, this year has been a terrible year for film, but I disagree. There's been some really interesting stuff coming out, some stuff that's really diverse. And then Dan also he followed this up with another letter. Hey Rob, I wanted to weigh in on the whole Halle Bailey as Ariel the Mermaid controversy. Why wouldn't Rob Marshall cast someone who looks more like they would live on or around the oceans? Obviously, Warner Brothers figured it out when they cast Jason Momoa as Aquaman. He is perfect casting for that type of character. The Rock voicing is a prime example of this as well. I know it's an animated character. Oh, you mean from Moana? Marvel and Fox did this a few times over the years as well. Michael Clark Duncan is Wilson Fisk. The Kingpin comes to mind. Also, Sam Jackson is Nick Fury, even though they changed the character in the comics. Yes, but in the Ultimates Avengers, they based Nick Fury on Sam Jackson. They did make a few mistakes, though. Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Blaze in the Josh Trank Fantastic Four, and Kerry Washington as Alicia Masters come to mind. The big one for me was when Denzel Washington was cast as the lead in The Manchurian Candidate. I agree with you there. Obviously, you know, Frank Sinatra was the star of the original. Why did we let this go? I don't know. Also, nobody cares about changing Latino characters in The Impossible to white in the film. That was a Spanish family that went through that disaster, not a white family. We want to make movies and TV shows more like the microcosm of everyday life. That's why we change characters in films and TV shows. I live in a town in Florida that still had a diner that had a back door for ordering for minorities back in 1993. How could that still be happening in 1993? Some people live in a time bubble and don't care that others know it. Of course, that diner has changed since. Thanks, Rob. Talk to you later. Dan Skip Allen. Well, you know, again, I mean, I've talked about this a lot. You know, the human beings have found reasons to hate other human beings for all of eternity. And to me, I mean, I think that Halle Bailey, she looks very mermaid-like. I've seen some artists' renditions. I even tweeted one. She's a beautiful girl. I think she has sort of that sweet mermaid-esque face. To me, I always look at it this way. It doesn't matter to me what color the character is really, unless as long as they're played by a great actor or great actress. Now, do I think that they should change the race of long-term characters? Well, my initial thoughts on that would be probably not, because then race becomes an overriding issue in the depiction of that character. When really my whole thought about the depiction of race or gender in a movie is it should be matter of fact. Once it's not matter of fact and it becomes an issue, it becomes at the forefront of whatever, it becomes problematic to me in terms of storytelling. Because what you should be seeing first and foremost is the character, not their race. And as many even black commentators have put it on YouTube over the last couple of days, I've watched a number of them. They've said, look, we want black characters. We want new original black characters. We don't need, as some of the black commentators I've watched put it, hand-me-downs. And I never thought of it that way. And one of the commentators I watched, who's not somebody I normally watch, but he's a very handsome guy, and I like his delivery, is there's a guy named The Amazing Lucas, who I don't agree with a lot of the time, but he put out a video about this issue that I watched, because I tried to watch a number of across the spectrum. And he was saying that, you know, when you were a kid growing up, as he put it, as a black kid, he was growing up, he always would get like his father's shoes or his father's suit. And he makes the point that I don't want my father's suit. I want my own suit. I don't want hand-me-downs. And I never thought of it that way, that these characters are hand-me-down characters. And from that perspective, I'm like, that's interesting. I don't disagree with that. Like, what you want is the great thing about Black Panther, the reason why I think the film meant so much to so many people in terms of representation, was the color of the cast in the movie was part of the tapestry of the film. It wasn't forced. Wakanda is a nation in Africa. The characters are black because that's where they're from. So it was not an issue. You don't even think twice about it. You're just watching the characters in the situation. And so it's not something that you think twice about. It's just the way it's supposed to be. Just like when I watch movies from Hong Kong, I love Chinese movies. I grew up loving Asian films. I watch a lot of Korean, Chinese, and Japanese cinema. I never think to myself, well, these people are Asian in the movie. Like when I watch Hard Boiled, for instance, with my man Tony Leung, who I love, and Chow Yun Fat, I don't think to myself that these are two Asian dudes that I'm watching. I'm watching a movie that's set in Hong Kong. So it just goes, it seems natural to me that everybody in the movie is Chinese or Asian, and they're speaking in Mandarin or Cantonese, and I'm watching it subtitled. I never think to myself when I'm watching a John Woo movie, like, boy, this movie would be better if these were white people. It's like I just don't think about that. I've never thought about that really ever. So what I want to do is I want to watch a movie and immerse myself in the characters. I don't want to start thinking to myself. I don't want to turn on a movie and I don't want the first thing that goes through my mind, well, why is this character black? Now, with The Little Mermaid, they're going to be fighting against that. There's no way around it. However, I would assume that Rob Marshall and the powers that be at Disney, because remember, people are making movies for global audiences now. So there's going to be people all around the world seeing these movies. That's what they're expecting. So movie making is truly taking on a global mindset, and that's just something that's a natural adjunct of the world we live in, with super fast trains and super fast telecommunications. The fact that we can have video chat on our iPhones with people all over the planet is pretty damn amazing. So we need to start thinking about ourselves as being really a part of the global village. We need to start thinking about ourselves like standing on the moon and looking back at the earth and being like, okay, if you were standing on the moon and you're making your business decisions about how you're going to appeal to the planet as you watch the earth rotate, you're like, okay, there's oceans that divide us. But for the most part, you'd be thinking about, how do I appeal to the most people on that planet there, from standing from your lunar perspective, you know? And I've read a lot of stuff about, I think this girl that Rob Marshall, and even though, I talked about Mary Poppins Returns, I thought Mary Poppins Returns was beautifully made. I just don't think it worked for me because it seemed like a recreation as opposed to something new and original. But I do think that we're going to get a mermaid in Ariel and Halle Bailey that's probably going to blow us all away. And she will, because they know they have to overcome the race issue. I think they've realized that race issue will last about 5 minutes into the film. You'll be so delighted by her performance that suddenly it's going to be everyone's going to feel like she belonged under the sea from the very beginning. And that's the way I look upon it. But we'll see if my theory is bared out. But I always go back to, I use this as an example. I read Stephen King's novella, Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. That was the original title, Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption. It was a story in different seasons. I want to say it came out in 1982. It's the same place that The Body, that later became Stand By Me, came from. There's The Breathing Method that has yet to be adapted, and there's Apt Pupil that Bryan Singer adapted. And those are all in that book. And I used to read Rita Hayworth and Shawshank Redemption every year for the holidays because I loved that story so much. When the film came out in 94, so that was for 12 years, I read that story every year. And the character of Red was a white dude, a white Irish dude. And when Frank Darabont was casting, or when he was going to make the movie, he cast Morgan Freeman. Now, in his mind, and anybody who's read the story, that character was always a white guy. But because no one had ever seen it on screen, I guess it wasn't considered, didn't matter. But when I saw the movie the first time, I was a little confused by that. Obviously, I loved Morgan Freeman's voiceover. And as soon as, that's only because I read the book so much, I read the story so much. And I love how they address the issue. Why do they call you Red? He actually says, maybe it's because I'm Irish. They didn't even bother to change the line. And you go with it. Who can't see Morgan Freeman as Red in the Shawshank Redemption? No one. You would never think twice about that character was supposedly a white guy. In the story, he was a white guy. And for me, I'd been like, wow, that's weird that they cast Morgan Freeman as Red. But it isn't weird, because once you get past me as a reader, the initial shock, you can't imagine anyone else playing that role. His voiceover in that film was just so indelible that I can't imagine ever seeing someone else in that role ever. Which, is amazing. Look, as we become more mature as a species and we start traveling, and more Americans, other than 65% of our population doesn't even have a passport, man. We got to start traveling. We got to start getting out there and meeting more people. So anyway, this last letter comes from Paul in Long Beach. God love Paul in Long Beach. He writes, okay, Rob, this is serious. And you know when Paul in Long Beach starts a letter like that, and this one is short, by the way. Rob, this is serious. Again, folks, I'm born and raised in LA. My own brother has never lived beyond the TMZ. Yesterday's quake was quite different. We couldn't remember when there were two large incidents in a row. In 1987, during the Whittier Narrows quake, if his daughter had been in her crib, she would not be alive today. I made a joke to my wife on Thursday, not realizing how shook she really was. Boy, do I feel like an ass today. Well, for those of you, I mean, I might glibly talk about earthquakes, but I was here for the Northridge quake where I talked about this earlier, where, the other day, where freeways fell down and people died. And earthquakes, especially if they're centered here in the greater metropolitan Los Angeles area, they can cause a lot of damage and unbelievable, ungodly sums of money and insurance payments. So it's not a joke. The earthquakes here in Los Angeles are not a joke. And, you know, I'll tell the story yet again if people missed it. But the thing from the thing from the Northridge quake that got me is I believe it was a CHP officer. He was a motorcycle cop. I don't know if he was CHP. I think he was CHP, California Highway Patrol, CHIPS. And he had been driving, and it was on a freeway overpass. And he was driving. The earthquake was at 4:30 in the morning, so it's still dark out. And he had probably driven on this stretch of road 100,000 times. You know, and you know how it is when you drive the same route. You kind of, it's almost mechanical. You're not necessarily paying attention. There's nobody on the road at 4:30 in the morning. This officer probably didn't even know that there was an earthquake. You know, when you're on a motorcycle, it's hard to tell. And literally, part of the freeway overpass, I believe it was a freeway interchange, had just fallen away, and he literally found himself in space, and he fell 75, 100 feet, died, didn't even know it. And whenever I think about earthquakes in California, I always think of that officer who, I mean, he never saw it coming. And you never know. The infrastructure here, yeah, I mean, it can be terrifying. And there were roads. I mean, it was not a very populated area where these earthquakes were. The epicenter was located, but there were still roads broken in half. You can look up pictures. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you just watch an asphalt road just cracked open like an eggshell. So, yeah. So it gets crazy. Wade O'Neill is here. Wade, thanks for the support of the channel, by the way, sir. I didn't know about the link between Monster Man and Shoot 'em Up. Saw Shoot 'em Up in the theater after day 2 of my Canadian CPA exam, and I couldn't have asked for better escapism. Underrated Giamatti performance. By the way, you know, Shoot 'em Up was also filmed in Toronto. So great Canadian crew and some great Canadian actors in there. And yes, Monster Man was directed by Michael Davis, along with movies like 8 Days a Week, 100 Girls and 100 Women. 100 Girls is a movie, 100 Women is another movie. And yeah, and the connection to me. My ex-wife did the poster for Monster Man, and I did the special features for Shoot 'em Up. Willow Yang says, Turnabout Intruder was ridiculous, but kind of fun. Women aren't allowed to be starship captains. That's not true, is it? Well, you know what? Look, people say that it was just, she was making a point. I don't think that is true. I think women were allowed to be starship captains. We just hadn't seen them, but she was making a point. I think she was being a little hyperbolic, because we do see the Romulan commander. There's other people that are starship commanders, but perhaps not maybe not so much in the Star Trek universe. But we've seen, of course, in Next Generation, there are many female starship commanders and ranking officers. One of my favorite characters in the Next Generation is Admiral Nechayev. How great was she? Mark C is here. Mark C, thank you for the support of the channel, Mark. Sadly, after 30 years of the character's existence, Halle Bailey will always be known as the Black Little Mermaid, not the Little Mermaid. That's why you don't race swap pop culture characters. Well, I don't think we know that yet, because if she delivers just a sublime performance, you know, there has never been a live action Little Mermaid. And maybe for us, but 10 years down the road, people who watch the live action Little Mermaid are just going to know her. And, you know, it's interesting. I just don't think that, look, Nick Fury to me growing up was white. Nick Fury was white most of my life until, of course, the Ultimates the Ultimates Avengers, which is an alternate Marvel universe, and they drew Nick Fury to look like Sam Jackson. So my whole life, I mean, Nick Fury was how Jim Steranko drew him. You know, even Hasselhoff played him, obviously, but to me, Nick Fury was the white Jim Steranko Shield, Nick Fury of Shield. So to me, it's interesting. I think a white Nick Fury on film would be weird to me, even though the character most of my life was a white dude. So I really do think that it depends. I mean, again, who could not see Sam Jackson as Nick Fury? You know, but growing up, to me, reading Marvel comics, Nick Fury was white. And when they put him in the movies as a black dude, well, he'd already been depicted as black in the Ultimate series, but he was drawn like Sam Jackson, so it seemed like a good fit. But again, remember, all of these changes only are relative to the way we see them. But in 20 or 30 years, Halle Bailey is going to be everybody's Ariel. And what's interesting is pop culture is constantly changing, and it's constantly being recycled, and it's evolving. And after 20 years, what does it really matter? Because as new generations are born, I mean, eventually in 100 years, people are probably going to think movies in general are quaint when you've got virtual reality. You can live in whole worlds and just plug into the noggin. It's all changing. What did David Warner as Chancellor Gorkon say in Star Trek VI? He said, if there is going to be a bright new future, we are going to have the most, I'm paraphrasing, we're going to have the hardest time living in it. And I think that's true of everybody. We're always living through revolutionary or evolutionary times, depending on who we are, and it'll all change. The only Little Mermaid some people are ever going to see is going to be Halle Bailey. And, depending on how good the movie is, I think it'll probably be good. It's funny. I like the way she looks as a mermaid. She's a very beautiful girl, but I love her face, and her face kind of has that mermaid-esque quality to it. There's something I think she'll do great. And the jury will still be out, of course, till we see it. But I think, like the character of Red in Shawshank Redemption, once you see Morgan Freeman and hear his voiceover, once you see her, people are going to be like, oh, because ultimately, I think the live action Little Mermaid will ultimately, as far as time and history show, will trump the animated version eventually. It might take 20 or 30 years, but it'll happen if it's good. Sighing Cassandra says, have faith, Willow, and to cheer you up, watch Animal Olympics, dated 1980. I'll tell you something, Sighing Cassandra. Would you like to know something about the Animal Olympics? The Animal Olympics was actually made by Lisberger Studios. And if that name doesn't ring a bell, Steven Lisberger, who went on to direct Tron, his studios created the Animal Olympics. And they had a hard time because, of course, we boycotted the Summer Olympics because of the Russian invasion of Afghanistan. And so they never finished Animal Olympics. But Animal Olympics does, in fact, have a connection to Tron. How crazy is that? Which you can see and hear more of in my documentary, The Making of Tron, on the Blu-ray that I edited and directed. The feature-length 88-minute Making of Tron documentary that in 2002 was nominated for Best Documentary of the Year, but it lost to the documentary for the original movie MASH, which I was kind of bummed out about, but no one was ever going to give Tron an award as much as I wanted it. Stubble McShave says, some people will say that it's something fishy with the casting of The Little Mermaid. Yes, they will, unless the movie's good and people see it and they're going to be like, wow, that was really good. At least that's the way, I kind of understand it. Mark C says, I think if you had put Kurt Russell as Nick Fury, we wouldn't worry about Sam Jackson. Yeah, but I think Sam Jackson's great as Nick Fury, and I really like the Ultimates, which is the Ultimates is kind of the model they took for the Avengers, sort of, kind of. I love Sam Jackson as Nick Fury. Kurt Russell could have been a good Nick Fury. I think that's great. That would have been great casting. But I mean, Nick Fury is badass. I have a Nick Fury figure right here. I love Sam Jackson's Nick Fury. I think he's great. I think they should make a Nick Fury movie, frankly. Because why not? Wouldn't it be great if they did? I think it'd be great if they made a Nick Fury, if they made a Nick Fury movie. It would be good. So yeah, I'm gonna jump in and see what you guys are saying in the chats, because we shall see. We shall see. How are you all? Let's see. What does anybody have to say? No, Emil Johnson says Never Ending Story. I think everybody's going to be singing that song for the next week at least. Emmanuel Ericart says, and Mermaid is not a race. If they want to make it green with a tuna head, go ahead. Well, they kind of did make it green with a tuna head in Aquaman. The mer race was not human looking. By the way, you guys, if you want to see a Polish horror mermaid romantic musical, I kid you not, there is a movie, and it was the debut feature from a woman who's Agnieszka, I can't pronounce her name in Polish, but it called The Lure. The Lure. It's fan-frickin-tastic. I love that movie. Criterion put it out on Blu-ray. It might be on the Criterion channel, but if you can find The Lure, like a fishing lure, please watch it. Like I said, it's a debut Polish horror mermaid musical, romantic musical. Because who doesn't want to see one of those? Don't you all? It's fantastic. And to me, that is, quite frankly, the most definitive mermaid movie, even more so than Splash. Where is Splash? I hear it's going to be on Disney streaming on Disney Plus, but where's the Blu-ray? Hasn't come out. So there you go. Matthew Goddard said, if Disney had the rights, there would have been a 40th anniversary Blu-ray for the 1977 Star Wars. They don't own them. I believe they do, because Fox owned the rights to Star Wars. So I think that, look, as everyone knows, the original Star Wars, well, not the very original, but a pre 1977 or pre 1997 version of Star Wars screened at the Academy last Saturday. A week ago today, and I didn't go. They showed a 70 millimeter print of the original Star Wars. Now, George Lucas had to approve that version to be screened. And he allowed that version to be screened because all of the technicians that worked on it, the visual effects people, even his ex-wife, Marsha Lucas, spoke. So I think I think Disney could do whatever they want if they wanted to. But look, George Lucas is still a grand poobah when it comes to Star Wars, and they don't want to piss him off. But yes, Disney does own Star Wars. Fox owns Star Wars. Now Disney owns it. They own it outright. They can do whatever they want with it. Contrary to anyone's belief, they own Star Wars outright. And I'm sure that George Lucas, in deference to him, they don't do it. But eventually, I can almost guarantee we're going to see the original versions of Star Wars, especially because there's so many versions now available on the web. It'd be great to get a definitive version in a real 4K master off the negative. I'd love to see that. But who knows if we ever will. I think we will. And I think Disney is going to bring it to you. But that's just me. Roblex63 says Disney is very lazy lately. Remake, reboot, rehash. Well, it's they're just going after the money. Making, again, at that budget level, it's really tough to make films, and with that amount of money, you can't risk it. I think what Disney's going to do, I think, as a function of Disney Plus, I would love to see it if for Disney Plus they go back and they make movies like I saw when I was growing up in the 70s. I loved Disney live action movies from the 70s. I loved movies like Treasure of Matacumbe and the Apple Dumpling Gang and Candle Shoe and the Herbie movies, even the Dexter Riley movies, the Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, things like that. I'll bet you that we will see more Disney live action movies that are being made directly for Disney Plus. Not expensive movies, but movies more along, or even remakes of those movies. Why not remake Treasure of Matacumbe? I'd love to see a remake of Island at the Top of the World. I loved Island at the Top of the World when I was a kid. The whale's graveyard and the dirigible and all that. It was so cool. I would love to see those movies. Matthew Goddard said, I feel like the actress from Harry Potter, Emma Watson, was just going through the motions. She was not Belle. Yeah, she might have been a little flat as Belle, I guess, but I thought the movie was handsomely mounted. I enjoyed it. Um, I thought that it wasn't bad. Um, who knows? Anyway, Sign Cassandra says people would not survive a new Black Adder. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Yeah, hey, they're bringing Red Dwarf back. They keep doing that. It's amazing to see that what goes on. Jim Boyers, our Detective Jim, says that he loved No Deposit, No Return. I love No Deposit, No Return. See, Disney had all these great live action movies in the 70s that my parents would take me to see them all. And I guess, they just decided they haven't been doing that. I mean, they weren't exactly burning up the box office. Disney tried to compete. They did The Black Hole after Star Wars. They, of course, did Tron, and they just couldn't get the theaters. So I'd love to see him try again, but what are they going to make? They tried with John Carter, even though I love John Carter, but I think that, as many know, I have a hypothesis. I hypothesize that my boy Bob Iger intentionally killed John Carter's chances at the box office because he didn't want George Lucas to take a second thought about giving him Star Wars. So, but that's just a theory. Dax Jacobson says, did they ever stop doing more Red Dwarf? They've got more Red Dwarf coming. Farky50 says, hey everyone, I love the live action Disney movies. They were dark and I love The Black Hole. I'm a 90s kid, so they were kind of scary sometimes. They were. Disney, I mean, other Disney movies from other eras that got re-released, like In Search of the Castaways. I love that. Of course, I love Mary Poppins and those movies. I love Mary Poppins. I thought Mary Poppins was great. But yeah. Matthew Gaudette says, I remember the computer that wore tennis shoes with Kurt Russell. Yeah, they made, I think it was 3. They made 3 Dexter Riley movies. Yeah, those were good. I like those movies. I thought they were pretty good. Roblex63 says, I hear the despecialized version of Star Wars are available on naughty sites. I've heard. I wouldn't know that. No, I mean, I've got so many versions of the original Star Wars. I've got my Laserdisc versions. I've got the DVD when they released the Laserdisc Masters, and I would just like to see the original version of Star Wars. I'd love to have a really beautifully color-timed version. The color-timed Blu-rays that exist of the original trilogy they're not great, as you can find out on the web. But yeah, so what can you say? I don't know. What else. Otter Vomit says, I keep waiting for a remake of Blake's 7. For those of you who don't know, Blake's 7 was a 4-year series that it was about these rebels. It was about rebels. It came out in the wake of Star Wars, and it's pretty compelling stuff. I own all the DVD sets of Blake's 7. It's not a show that's really known in the United States, but it's a great show. If you like science fiction shows, it's worth watching. And if you're used to watching Doctor Who or things like that, where they would shoot outside exteriors in 16 millimeter, and then they would shoot the interiors on videotape and intercut, you kind of get where I'm coming from. It was good stuff. I liked it. I thought it was a good show. And one of the main stars recently passed away, which is a bummer. Doc Civil says, can you imagine a relaunch of UFO with a good budget? Well, UFO had a good budget. For those of you who don't know, one of my favorite TV shows of all time, I even did a Robservations chat about it. UFO, which was made in 1969 through 1971, ran 26 episodes. And it was basically the precursor to Space 1999. I loved it. I worked with Bill Hunt, and we came up with a pitch for a modern UFO series that actually kept the original series in continuity, because the main portion of UFO took place in 1980, and then it flashes back to the 70s when you saw Shadow, the supreme headquarters of the Alien Defense Organization, was formed. And our new idea for UFO is to keep that in continuity and draw upon it the way Game of Thrones drew upon their history, the history of Westeros. So I would love to see that. If you guys haven't seen UFO, I believe it's streaming on Amazon now. Somebody told me that UFO is streaming on Amazon. And of course, it's very much a product of its time. But man, what a great show that is. I love it. Very strange and dark. Yes, Mukbang Review says, I think UFO is on Amazon Prime or Hulu. I've told I've been told it's on Hulu. Doc Civil says UFO 2020. We didn't call it. We didn't give it a date, but we just called it UFO. And it's a pretty. We wrote. I thought we came up with all new characters and a couple of different twists. And it was submitted through a friend of mine, but they didn't really go for it. I would still like to. It's funny that a good friend of mine that another TV writer, thought we leaned in too heavily to the original mythology, but that's where it all came from. And I think being able to have a new mythology like that and draw upon it would have made for a great series, because our basic idea is that the aliens stopped coming. And Shadow was basically destroyed in a final defense, and some people survive. We were going to bring back Benedict Cumberbatch's mother to play Virginia Lake. She is still alive, obviously, Wanda Ventum, and we wanted to have her come kind of the way Diana Rigg came back, and she was not came back, but how they used Diana Rigg in Game of Thrones. We wanted to bring Wanda Ventum back to play Colonel Lake, although she would be part of a different organization now. Mark C says he wants a Condor Man remake. That was another early 80s live action Disney movie that nobody talks about when you talk about superhero movies. Yeah. But we'll see. Who knows? Maybe somebody will do it. Mark Balam says I couldn't get into it like Captain Scarlet. Dax Jacobson says UFO was such a cool show. The ladies who worked on the moon. It was true. It's true. Absolutely. Well, everyone, I think it's been an hour. This was a good quick chat. I didn't have a lot of letters to read today. It's a slow weekend, and I think I'm going to let you guys go enjoy. I want to thank everybody for being here. This will be I know it's amazing. I do an hour-long chat, and people are like, oh, it's so short today. But some days are like that. Basically, I really just wanted to go on and wish Willow Yang, tell her to get on it and fix that mistake, and it's all going to work out. Her article is going to be published, and we can all pop champagne and drink live on the air with Willow Yang. So I want to thank everybody for writing in. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel. I want to thank my moderators that are here, Jim and Terry, for doing a great job moderating. Cyan Cassandra says, how come the new Shaft is available on Netflix? The movie's great, but being killed in the theaters. Well, I don't think it's available on Netflix domestically. I only think it's available on Netflix internationally. And I think the reason they did that is because I hate to say it, but when you if you say Shaft is an urban movie, I know that was a genre, it probably just didn't travel very well. And I'm sure they didn't make it for a lot of money. And Netflix was probably built in to that deal, and it probably defrayed. The one thing for filmmaking, when it comes to Netflix movies, it helps defray the costs. If you know that Netflix might have co-financed the film because they wanted it. I mean, getting a Sam Jackson movie with the original Shaft, Richard Roundtree, that's a huge coup for them. And while they're not going to be spending money on big budget movies like they were saying, that still was something I'm sure the people that financed that new Shaft, if Netflix had come in and was co-financing it from the get-go, that was probably great. And they dropped that movie in the middle of the summer, where you have Nick Fury once again seen at the end of Endgame, and then he's a big part of Spider-Man Far From Home. You know how that is. And that was probably a really good choice on the part of Netflix, at least. So that's where that came from. I also want to thank Greg Smith for being here. I don't think I thanked Greg Smith. And then, of course, Mike Bodden. Anyway, as Jim pointed out, if you like these chats, please hit like, please subscribe. That always helps me. It helps in the long run with YouTube analytics, which I very much appreciate. And hopefully we're not going to have any more big earthquakes in California, because that would not be good. Hopefully, they said that the 6.4 did not necessarily alleviate anything as far as the pressure is concerned, but maybe that 7.1 did, because the 7.1 is much bigger. But anyway, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank all members of all you imagination connoisseurs of the Post-Geek Singularity. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. I will be back tomorrow, and I'm going to go, open up Hot Toys figures and rearrange them. I need to figure out what I'm going to do with my DC figures. Does Wonder Woman make it in the shelf? Am I going to finally put the backing and light this up? Because everybody wants me to light these shelves up. I mean, I know, I get it. I understand. They're better lit up anyway. So I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank Lucky Tiger. as you all know, these chats are sponsored by Get Lucky Tiger. Oh, go to Get Lucky Tiger to get Lucky Tiger. But Lucky Tiger men's grooming products for those men who want to look good and feel great. You can go and use PGS and checkout and get 20% off your order. Thanks for everybody who keeps supporting the channel through super chats and supporting. If you go to the website's becoming more and more interactive, and I've already started working on the first viewer's choice bit. And then next week, I'm going to start doing daily shows as well as these chats, quick ones, themed shows. Like I think Tuesday is going to be fully articulated. So every Tuesday, I'm going to do an additional show that's going to be about a short show, but it'll be about a toy or a model kit or some kind of geek-related product. I might do Rob's Library and talk about a book or two. And then, of course, Comic-Con starts on the 18th of July. And by the way, I want to thank everybody for telling me that Sideshow did put up that Guardians of the Galaxy 2 Stan Lee hot toy for pre-order. If you haven't seen that, it's pretty amazing. I did not buy the Stan Lee hot toy because I just thought it was it was cool. It honored Stan Lee, but I was like, I wish they would make a hot toy figure from one of his appearances. Maybe the Stan Lee DJ from Deadpool, but they made the Stan Lee that was sitting with the Watchers in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. And I'm like, oh, well, there's the figure to get. So good on them. But anyway, as I always say, I want to remind all of you, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thanks to the moderators. Thank you all for being here. And remember, have a better day.